What goes through a cow's mind when you approach her? There is a moment that most people never notice. It happens before you get close. Before you reach out your hand, before you say a word, before your boots touch the ground near the fence. It happens the second you enter her field of awareness. And in that moment, her entire nervous system begins a process that will determine everything that follows. She has already smelled you. She has already begun reading information about you that you didn't even know you were sending. And here is what might surprise you. She is not cautious around you because you are big. She doesn't respond to you the way she does because you are loud or unpredictable. She responds to you the way she does because of something far older, far deeper, and far more fascinating than most people ever stop to consider. Today, we are going inside that moment. We are going to follow what happens, step by step, sensation by sensation, inside the mind of a cow when a human approaches. What she feels, what she remembers, what she calculates, and what she decides. By the end, I think you will never walk toward a cow the same way again. Let's start before you are even visible to her. You are crossing a field. The air carries your scent before your shape does. And somewhere among the herd, a cow lifts her muzzle toward the wind. She has caught something. The olfactory system of a cow is one of the most powerful sensory tools in the animal kingdom. Cattle can detect odors from distances of up to 6 miles under the right conditions, 6 miles. But it is not just the presence of a scent she is detecting. It is the specific chemical signature of your emotional state. When a human is anxious or stressed, the body releases cortisol and adrenaline. These compounds have a scent. She can detect them. She is, in a very real sense, reading your emotional state from the air before she has even focused her eyes on you. This is the first thing that happens when you approach, not a visual assessment, not a recognition of your face, a chemical reading, a biological message that your body sends ahead of you, whether you intend it or not. And she matches it against her memory. Because cattle have remarkable long-term memory for scents. If your smell has ever been paired with discomfort or fear, she begins that association the moment you reach her. If your scent has been paired with calmness, with food, with gentle handling, she begins that association too. Memory is not just something she uses to recognize places. Memory is something she uses to prepare for what is coming. So already, before you are close, she is preparing. Her body is making adjustments, her heart rate beginning to shift, one way or another, based entirely on the chemistry of the wind. Now you are within her visual field. And this is where things get genuinely fascinating. A cow's eyes are positioned on the sides of her head, a design that gives her a visual field of approximately 330 degrees, almost all the way around. She can see behind her without turning. She can detect movement across nearly her entire horizon. This is not an accident. This is millions of years of evolution building a surveillance system for a prey animal who needed to survive in open grasslands where danger could come from anywhere. But because her eyes are on the sides of her head, she has very little binocular vision, that overlapping field you and I use to judge depth and distance. Her binocular zone is a narrow strip directly in front of her. Everywhere else, she uses one eye at a time. And monocular vision does something very specific. It is extraordinarily sensitive to motion while being poor at depth perception. What this means in practice is that a slow, steady approach reads very differently than a quick or sudden one. A slow approach gives her time to process your shape, confirm your identity, check you against memory. A fast approach, even if you intend no harm, triggers something ancient in her nervous system, something that says, things that move fast toward me are usually not safe. She doesn't think this consciously. It happens below the level of reason, in the oldest parts of her brain, the parts that were built long before she was ever domesticated, long before she ever lived alongside humans. She is not choosing to be nervous. She is not being difficult. She is running a program that kept her ancestors alive. And our job, if we want a real connection with her, is to learn to speak to that program in a language it understands. Let's talk about what she sees when she looks at you. Cattle have dichromatic vision. They see the world into color channels rather than three. The world they inhabit is not black and white, but it is muted compared to what you see. Colors that seem vivid to you appear as variations in brightness and tone to her. Because she is less sensitive to color, she is more sensitive to contrast and movement. Her visual system is tuned differently. What captures her attention, what activates her threat detection pathways, is not color but the sudden change of contrast in her environment. A person standing still blends into the landscape. A person moving suddenly becomes very visible. A shadow crossing unexpectedly, a coat billowing in wind. These send information flooding through her visual system. She is not spooky, she is precise. Her nervous system is responding exactly as it was designed to respond. And once you understand that, you begin to see her not as an unpredictable animal but as a completely logical one, operating on a different set of inputs than you are. When she looks at you, she is also reading your body language, not in a vague, general way, in a detailed, specific way. Studies conducted over the last 2 decades have shown that cattle can distinguish between human facial expressions. They respond differently, behaviorally and physiologically, to humans approaching with open, relaxed posture versus those approaching with rigid, tense body language. Their heart rates differ. Their cortisol levels differ. Their willingness to engage or retreat differs. She is reading you constantly. From the moment you enter her field of vision, she is taking in data that you are broadcasting without knowing it. Now here is something that surprises nearly everyone the first time they learn it. She knows who you are, not in an abstract way. Specifically, individually, she knows your face. She knows your voice. She knows your smell. Research has demonstrated that cattle can recognize and remember individual human faces, and they retain these recognitions over time. In studies, cattle were shown photographs of human faces and consistently demonstrated genuine recognition capacity beyond chance. In other research, cattle who had been handled by specific individuals responded measurably differently to those individuals than 2 strangers. Lower heart rate, lower cortisol, greater willingness to approach. This means the relationship you have built with her is stored. It is not lost between visits. It is not reset each morning. She carries a record of your interactions, and that record shapes how her body prepares when she sees you coming. Think about what that means. You are not starting from zero each time. You are starting from wherever your history has placed you. Every calm interaction, every patient moment, every time you moved slowly and spoke quietly, all of that has built something in her memory that she is drawing on right now as you approach. And every rushed handling, every moment of stress, every time the experience ended badly, that is stored too. She is not holding a grudge. She is simply doing what intelligent animals do, using past experience to predict what comes next and preparing her body accordingly. This is why experienced cattle handlers talk about building trust not as a metaphor but as a literal process. You are constructing a record in her brain, a record that says, this human means safety, or this human means uncertainty. She will act on that record before you have even reached her. Let's go deeper. Let's talk about what is happening in her nervous system in the seconds of your approach. Her autonomic nervous system is running a constant process called vigilance, a fundamental feature of prey animal neurobiology. Vigilance means she is allocating resources at all times to scanning for signals that something dangerous is near. When you appear, her amygdala, the brain region associated with fear responses and emotional processing, begins to activate. Stress hormones are released. Blood flow shifts toward the muscles. Her ears rotate toward you. Her pupils may dilate slightly, but this cascade can be interrupted. It can be redirected, not through force or restraint, but through specific sensory signals that tell her ancient nervous system what is approaching is not a threat. One of the most powerful of these signals is pace. When you slow down, genuinely slow down, something measurable happens in her body. Research has shown that approach speed directly affects heart rate in cattle. Slow, steady movement gives her nervous system time to reevaluate. It gives her amygdala time to receive competing information. This thing is not lunging, not sprinting, not moving the way predators move. Another powerful signal is trajectory. Moving directly toward her, a straight, linear path aimed at her body, is how predators move. They don't circle. They close distance directly and efficiently. When you approach on a curved or indirect path, you send a signal that says, "I am not hunting you. I am not targeting you." She reads this. Her nervous system reads this. And when the reading resolves clearly, the threat cascade slows. The amygdala quiets. And something else begins to emerge. Something that in the language of neuroscience is called the activation of the seeking system. The seeking system. Let's spend some time here because this is where the psychology of the cow and the psychology of connection meet most beautifully. The neuroscientist Jaak Panksepp, who spent decades mapping the emotional architecture of mammalian brains, identified several primary emotional systems conserved across all mammals, meaning they exist in humans, in dogs, in cattle. One of the most fundamental is the seeking system, a network driven centrally by dopamine that pushes the animal toward exploring, investigating novelty, and pursuing what is interesting. The seeking system is not fear. It is not submission. It is the experience of wanting to know more, the experience of being pulled toward something. And it is an experience that cattle have in rich, measurable neurochemical detail. When a cow approaches you, when she stretches her neck toward your hand, when she takes a step in your direction, she is not being passive. She is driven by a genuine motivational state. She wants to investigate. Her internal signal says, "This is interesting. This might be worth understanding. Go closer and find out more." This is curiosity, real curiosity. And it is one of the most profound things to witness in a cow, precisely because it is so often misunderstood. People sometimes interpret a cow's curious approach as evidence that the animal isn't bright enough to be afraid. Exactly the opposite is true. It means her threat assessment has resolved in your favor, and she has enough cognitive richness to be actively interested in what you are. Let's talk about touch. Because when contact finally happens, when your hand reaches her neck, her nose, her forehead, something physiological occurs in both of you. In cattle, gentle physical contact with a trusted human triggers a suite of responses that parallel what happens in other mammals during positive social bonding. Heart rate decreases. Cortisol drops. Behavioral indicators of stress diminish. Research measuring these responses has consistently found that gentle stroking by a familiar human handler produces genuine, measurable relaxation in cattle. This is not vague comfort. This is a neurochemical event. The same systems that govern social bonding in mammals, involving oxytocin, serotonin, the parasympathetic nervous system, are active when a cow is being gently handled by someone she trusts. She is not simply tolerating your touch. In the right circumstances, with the right history and the right approach, she is experiencing something her biology registers as a positive social event. Something worth seeking out, because cattle are deeply social animals who have evolved to find safety, comfort, and well-being in close contact with members of their group. And here is the remarkable part. For some cattle, over time, a trusted human can become part of that group in a functional sense. Not because she is confused about what you are, but because the presence of a trusted human activates the same neurochemical pathways that the presence of a trusted herdmate does: safety, familiarity, belonging. This is not sentiment. This is the finding of careful research on cattle's social behavior and human-animal interaction. The bond is real, the neurochemistry is real, and it begins every single time in that first moment of approach. Now I want to talk about something that doesn't get discussed nearly enough: the genuine emotional life of cows. For a long time, the dominant view in animal science was that cattle were relatively simple creatures, reactive, instinct-driven. with minimal inner experience. That view has been dismantled by decades of rigorous research. What we now understand is that cattle have a rich emotional life that includes not just fear and comfort, but frustration, excitement, anticipation, contentment, and what researchers have documented as optimism and pessimism. Yes, optimism and pessimism. In cattle, a research paradigm called the judgment bias test measures something like emotional perspective in animals. The logic is elegant. An animal in a positive emotional state makes more optimistic decisions when faced with ambiguous situations, while one in a negative state makes pessimistic decisions. When cattle are handled in ways that promote well-being, with gentle, predictable human contact, with control over their environment, with opportunities for social connection, they show measurably more optimistic judgment. They approach ambiguous situations with more confidence. They give the world more benefit of the doubt. When cattle experience chronic stress, the opposite happens. They become pessimistic, more reactive, more likely to assume the worst, more likely to read your approach as a threat. What this tells us is profound. The quality of the relationship you build with a cow doesn't just change her behavior. It changes her emotional baseline. It changes the lens through which she experiences the world. A cow who has been handled with consistent patience is literally more optimistic than one who has not. And you, approaching across the field, are part of what creates that. Every single time. Let's talk about what she hears as you come closer. Cattle can hear frequencies slightly beyond the human range, particularly in the lower registers. But more relevant than range is how she processes the human voice specifically. Research has demonstrated that cattle respond differently to different qualities of voice. Low, calm voices produce smaller stress responses than sharp or raised ones. They respond to tone and pace in ways consistent with what we know about how vocalizations affect mammalian nervous systems. And cattle can recognize individual human voices, responding measurably differently to familiar voices, associated with positive experiences versus those of strangers. So when you speak as you approach, something quiet, something low, something steady, you are doing more than announcing your presence. If she knows your voice, if she has good memories tied to it, your voice is genuinely calming to her in a neurochemical sense. It is a signal that has been paired, through experience, with outcomes that were safe. This is also why changes in your voice matter. If you are anxious, your voice changes in ways she detects. If you are impatient or stressed, even about something completely unrelated to her, she receives that information through subtle shifts in your pitch, your tempo, the tension in your breath. She doesn't know why you're stressed. She only knows that the human approaching is sending stress signals. And her nervous system responds to signals, not to reasons. I want to pause here for a moment, because all of this science is pointing toward something that goes beyond data and methodology. It points toward presence. When you walk toward her carrying the weight of your day, your frustrations, your distractions, your preoccupations, she feels it. Not metaphorically, physiologically. Your emotional state is being broadcast on frequencies she has evolved to read with extraordinary precision. And when you walk toward her having made a conscious choice to set all of that down, to breathe, too slow to arrive in the present, she feels that too. She feels the difference. She responds to the difference. This is why some people seem to have a gift with cattle and others don't. It is not a special power. It is that some people have learned, sometimes without knowing it, to be present, to quiet the internal noise, to approach with their full attention on the animal in front of them, and she rewards that presence, with curiosity instead of fear, with approach instead of retreat, with that slow stretching of the neck toward your hand that is one of the most quietly profound things available to anyone who works with these animals. There is a specific moment in every approach that handlers who truly know cattle will recognize immediately when I describe it. It is the moment when she exhales, not dramatically, just a quiet, almost imperceptible softening, a breath that comes out slowly rather than in the held, shallow pattern of vigilance, sometimes accompanied by a small drop of the head, sometimes by a softening of the muscles around her eyes and jaw. In that moment, her nervous system has made a decision. The threat assessment is complete. The conclusion is safety. And the relief of that conclusion, the neurochemical shift from vigilance to ease, is something she experiences as a genuine sensation. This is the moment you have been building toward with every slow step, every low word, every pause that gave her time to adjust. This is what trust is for. This is what the relationship is for. In that exhale, she is telling you something. She is telling you that you have shown up in a way her ancient nervous system recognizes as trustworthy. And if you are paying attention, there is a corresponding feeling in you, a quieting, a settling, the particular satisfaction of having communicated across a boundary that most people never try to cross. Let's close by thinking about the bigger picture. The moment you approach a cow is never just a moment. It is the sum of every moment before it. Every interaction, every choice about how you moved and spoke and touched. All of it is alive in the record she carries. And that accumulated record adds up to something that deserves a word we don't often use when talking about cattle, trust, not habituation, not compliance, not tolerance, trust. There is a real difference. Habituation is when an animal stops reacting to a stimulus because repeated exposure has shown it to be irrelevant. A cow who is habituated to your presence simply ignores you. She has filed you under neutral. Trust is different. Trust involves active positive expectation. A cow who trusts you doesn't just fail to fear you. She actively anticipates something good from your presence. She comes toward you. She seeks contact. She shows, through her behavior, that she has made a decision about you. And trust is built the same way it is built in every relationship, through consistency, through showing up in a way that matches what you have promised her, not with words, but with how you move, through being the same person she remembered when you return after an absence, through treating difficult, necessary moments with care rather than convenience. So let's stand at the edge of the field one more time and begin the approach again, but now with all of this in mind. You pause before you enter. You take a breath. You notice the residue of the day in your body, the tension in your shoulders, the pace of your thoughts, and you make a choice to set it aside. Not to pretend it doesn't exist. To set it aside deliberately for this. You step forward slowly. Your path curves gently toward her space rather than cutting straight to it. Your voice, when you speak, is low and unhurried. She catches your scent. She lifts her head. Her ears rotate toward you. She runs her assessment, checking your chemical signature against what she knows about you. And because you have been consistent, because the record says this human is safe, the assessment resolves quickly. Not alarm, engagement. She watches you come. She reads your pace, your posture, the quality of your movement. All of it matches what she knows: calm, unhurried, not a predator's trajectory. You pause before you reach her. You give her the choice. And she makes it. She stretches her neck toward you, nostrils working, confirming up close what the distance already told her. You bring your hand up slowly. She touches her nose to it. You move to her neck, and you begin to stroke gently, slowly. And you feel her whole body soften. You feel the exhale. Two nervous systems, one human, one bovine, both mammals. Both built for social connection by the same ancient evolutionary forces in genuine communication. Real communication. Neurochemical and behavioral and relational. She is not just an animal you are touching. She is a being who has made a decision about you over time and is expressing that decision right now with her body. And what you are receiving in this moment, what she is offering freely, without obligation, is trust. This is what goes through a cow's mind when you approach her. Not simple instinct, not mechanical reflex, not the blank processing of a system too primitive to experience anything meaningful. A cascade of memory and sensation and emotional processing that has been running in some form for tens of millions of years. A sophisticated assessment of who you are, what you represent, what you have been, and what you are likely to be. A check against a record that you have been building with her, whether you knew it or not, from the very first day. And in the middle of all that biology, all that evolutionary history, all that neurochemical complexity, a single question. Simple and ancient and entirely without words. Are you safe? The answer you give, not with language, but with your pace and your posture and your voice and your touch. And the accumulated weight of every moment you have shared. That answer is your relationship. It is everything. It is the whole story of what exists between you. And it begins, every single time, in the approach. Thank you for watching. If understanding cattle from the inside, their emotional world, their intelligence, the depth of what is possible in the relationship between a human and a cow, if that speaks to you, then this channel was made for you. Leave a comment and tell me, what was the moment you realized there was something genuinely real happening between you and a cow? I want to hear it. Because this is not just science, it is also memory. It is also relationship. See you in the next one.